Good morning. It's Thursday, May 2nd. And while I'm roaming through the news about some of the riots that have been going on the college campuses, I'm remembering stuff that I did when I was a kid. And the incident that just sparked this memory is the fact that I saw the headlines that a riot police force of many policemen stormed the college campus, I think, at Columbia. So Columbia is a very respectable university. I have no problem with that. But when I think back to my youth, we used to hang out in front of the candy store. And we might have 6 or 7 kids hanging out there at any given time. And periodically, the police would come around and hassle us a little bit to make sure we were on the up and up. And they'd line us up against the wall and they'd ask us some dumb questions. And then they'd let us go, and we'd all laugh. And occasionally, one of the policemen who was Jewish said to us, you know, there are many on the force that are anti-Semitic, so you have to be careful when you're messing with the New York City police at that particular time. And I always remember that, and I always remember that policeman was a stand-up guy because he was trying to keep us on the straight and narrow. And one of the peculiar incidents that happened there one day is I had a young friend who was working in the garment district. I'm not sure what job he had in the garment district. It might have been like a cutter. Cutters made a good buck in the garment district in those days. Anyhow, he was 18 or 19 years old. He was a good friend. And he bought himself a car, brand new car, a Plymouth, black Plymouth, I remember. Cost him $1,800. And he was sitting on top of the car when the cops came by one time, and they came over to him and they asked him a dumb question like, why are you sitting on that car? Do you own it? And he very politely said, yes, sir. And the cop said, well, give up the car anyhow. I don't want to see this happening. So anyhow, I've had as a youth several encounters with the police. And most of the time it was not a problem. They were just coming around and doing their jobs and making sure that we weren't causing any problems for the stores in the neighborhood, you know. But when I read today that hundreds of police are storming the colleges like Columbia because of the protesters, and I'm looking at these protesters, and I think the whole thing is totally out of hand. I have no problem with people who protest. I did my share of protesting when I was a youth also. And like I've said many times before, I marched in the May Day parade and things like that. But these protests on the college campuses are getting ridiculous. Building tents on the lawn, preventing people from going to class, and graduations in schools are being canceled because of the activities of the students. And that's okay. I have no problem with them canceling the graduation exercises. But imagine they cancel an exercise at graduation and they expected to have 65,000 people at the football stadium in that particular school. So that's a big cancellation. But if these kids didn't finish this last semester, why are they graduating? I know the semester's almost over, but there's got to be final exams or something that they're missing by their protesting. So why should they graduate? Why should the colleges lean over backwards and let them graduate? I don't know if I would allow that. But if he's got enough credits to graduate, maybe I would accept that. The other thing about these protests is the actions of many of the leaders of these institutions haven't stepped forward. They haven't stepped forward to stop these protests. They haven't gone online, gone on and made some speeches for where they stand and what should be correct behavior? Because much of the behavior is not correct. Much of the behavior shows that there's a hatred of one side or the other. And so why? Why should these schools even hold graduation exercises? It's the students' decision. They have made these decisions. They have put their lives on the line. And many of them will have an arrest record to deal with. And maybe there'll be bosses that take advantage of that. Because if you come there and you don't have a clean record, they could say, we'll give you a job, but we're not going to pay you what you're worth. You got to prove to us that you're not that individual that stood online for no reason at all. So there are many things that are going to affect the lives of these children who believe they're doing something wonderful for the world by protesting. But they're not really doing anything wonderful for the world because their protests are looked upon by most people as uncontrolled adolescence. You know, it's one thing to have a position. It's another thing to take the wrong action in defending that position. So if you're out there closing up an institution of learning because you're taking a position, you're not doing anybody any good. You're only creating a mass amount of community who's against you because not everybody agrees with you. And you have spurred some terrible cause. You have spurred anti-Semitism like crazy over your protests. And what are you going to say when some Jews are injured because you are because you are out there protesting and giving the world the wrong impression? This is a mess. It's a true mess that this country has gotten itself into. And most of the youth don't understand it. They haven't lived long enough. They don't know the total history. I bet you there are many standing on that line that never heard of the Holocaust. So I am not against protesting, but I am against protesting incorrectly. I'm not against people standing out and holding signs for 5 or 6 hours. But when you take over campuses and you build tents and everything, you've gone out of bounds in my mind. So that's all I want to say this morning. I'm not a happy person about the protests. I'm not a happy person about the world situation. And I'm not a happy person that Hamas has agreed to some settling of that conflict, but we don't know when they're going to tell the rest of the world that they've agreed. So that's where we stand right now. A mess, a gigantic mess. Have a great day. Bye.